Do you feel the craziness right now?
Overwhelming. And I feel like one of my great advantages in life is I, grew up around a fair amount of craziness and I'm not bothered by it. And I try never to be busy. I hate being busy. I think people who are busy it's a sign of kind of narcissism and disorganization if you complain about being busy. But I feel both busy and a little bit shocked by everything that's going
Yeah.
on. So I would say I've reached my limit, and I have a very high limit.
Well, I want to say congratulations, first of all, that President Trump has selected you as press secretary. I was stunned by that news last week, and I woke up, I said, what the hell? And I immediately knew it was a joke. I mean, not a joke, but I don't know who started the rumor or who made a fake post about it. What was your morning like that morning? Because I texted you. I knew it was a joke right away. I mean, I texted you and I just said, this is hilarious. But I'm sure people fell for it, right?
Well, I was actually working that morning when it came out, I guess, because by the time I got to my phone, it was just overwhelming. That's the last job you would want. I'm 55. After 33 years in the media, I don't want to sit in a room full of people from CBS News, you know what I mean, and have to post some party line. I love Trump. I voted for Trump. I did rallies for Trump. Adult men can speak for themselves, and I don't think anybody, at least any middle-aged man, I speak for the middle-aged man community, wants to read other people's talking points. I mean, of course not. And I definitely would not do that. I would not work. Most people haven't been in the briefing room of the White House. It's the most depressing, airless, sad, kind of just creepy. It smells like a Tim Walz's locker room. It's just like naughty stuff has gone on there. Impure thoughts have been had there. I just don't want to be in that environment at this age at all. But I would love to go for a day and do a guest gig or something just to get my aggressions out. That would be fun.
Well, you got to do that. You got to do that quite a bit on this tour. I mean, going around the country and even before that, around the world. But you spent quite a bit of time, obviously, with the president-elect here in the last few months. I hate to ask the obvious question, but what was that like? What was that? I mean, so many people watching right now, I just can't even imagine being in a room with the president. They would probably, be a nervous wreck, but you got to spend quite a bit of time with him. What was that like for you?
Well, I mean, how many times have you, Clayton Morris, interviewed Donald Trump? 100? So no, Trump well. I don't know if your viewers know that you do, but I know that you do. And he's exactly the same in person as he is, as you well know, as he is in private, which is kind of the great thing about him. He's more, he's more colorful in private. He's a little freer in what he'll say, but in general, he's the same guy. It's not like, some televangelist who gets off the stage and is a totally different person. He's not like that at all. He's like, I've been with Trump in a lot of different countries, and he's always the same guy. So he's great. I mean, he's the most entertaining, the most interesting. He has perceptions that you wouldn't kind of come to by yourself. He's insightful. He's not like a genius in a conventional sense, but he has an intuitive sense that's honestly brilliant. I mean, you don't get to be president by accident, especially the way that he did it. No, he's an amazing person, and I don't think anybody who spent time with, and he's a very warm person, as you know. He's a legit warm guy, and so no, I really enjoyed it. I mean, Friday night I watched the Tyson fight. I know Tyson. Trump knows Tyson really well. Really loves Tyson as a person. He said he had 17 Tyson fights at his casinos. So he's known Tyson for 40 years and really likes him as a person. And I know Mike pretty well, and I like him a lot as a person too. So we, just sat and watched the fights and ate ice cream sundaes, and it's fun. He's a good guy. And the last thing I'll say about Trump is there's so much swirling around him that's intense, and some of it's very, very dark, and efforts to kill him. Obviously, he never seems bothered by it. And I don't really understand. And his physical stamina, I don't know how a man, as I said, 55, if I ate a Big Mac and then an ice cream sundae, which I love to do, by the way, first of all, I get really, really quick, immediately. The next day I can't fit in my pants. And I'm totally out of energy and spacey, and just bad food affects me. I think it affects all of us. It does not affect him. It's the weirdest thing you've ever seen. He scarf a Big Mac and he's like totally on it. I don't know. He's got a different metabolism, just physiologically. He's different.
Well, you bring up a great point. Natalie and I were sitting there one night just watching him, and he was at some event, and then he was at some other event, and he's just as gracious and hugging people and shaking hands, and he's there. Then he's going to be there for like 3 hours, and then he's got to go to something else. I mean, if I have to do something like that once every 6 months, like I fixate on it for like 6 months. Like, I have to be at this thing 6 months from now for 3 hours. Like, are you kidding me? And he's doing it multiple times a day, up early also. I mean, I know when we were doing, Fox and Friends together, he was up and he'd call into the show, and we were up like super early, and he'd be up super early, and then he's up super late. And I don't know how he does it. I really don't.
Well, it's beyond. I mean, I don't get it either. And he's an older man. I mean, he's older. So I don't understand it. And I've asked him, and I've asked people around him, and I've asked, the whole Maha group, who I know well and really like, always encouraging me not to eat pizza, but, great people who know a lot about health and the body. And like, I know you and Natalie do, how could a guy, given everything about him, how could he respond like physically? And they're all like, there's just, some people are just genetic anomalies. He's that. If I tried that, I'll speak for myself. If I tried that, I would be in a diabetic coma. Being like no sleep, constant travel, always performing, getting attacked from all sides, massive cortisone levels, stress levels. And I'm not sucking up, by the way. I'm not like, Trump is perfect or anything like that. But that's just true. Donald Trump is like not like you and me that way at all.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I can go on a health binge for a few weeks and feel great, and then just have, 1 or 2 off meals, and I feel like Homer Simpson, like in just like short order. It's pretty remarkable. And then it's a slippery slope, and then I just want to keep doing it, just keep eating more donuts. It's been great. I have so many things. I just would love to be able to sit down with you for just hours and just be able to just to talk about everything that's going on in this country.
Natalie said you guys were coming to stay with us in March, which I'm very psyched for.
I would love that. I'm super excited about this.
Park at our house. Bring all the
kids. Bring the kids and bring the puppy. And I mean, I don't know how you've managed to do it. Right now, when you look at, there's so many different directions that I have in my brain that I want to talk to you about. I mean, when you look right now at President Trump and where things are going with this country, we've got about 50 or so odd days until he becomes president of the United States. Where do you think his blind spots are right now? Obviously, you've been around him. You know that he has people's ear. People come up to him. And something that Colonel Douglas Macgregor has said to me a couple of times is that very often it's maybe the last people in the room who've had incredible influence over President Trump. What do you think he's learned from 2016 and in his presidency until now that you've been able to spend so much time with him?
I think he's learned a bunch. He's learned the depth of the corruption of the systems that run the country, of the institutions that we live under, the Department of Justice, the intel world. I mean, he made Tulsi Gabbard director of national intelligence. It's just really an amazing fact. It's amazing. Bobby Kennedy at HHS, incredible. Dr. Oz at CMS. Marty McCary, I think, at FDA. I mean, he put reformers, like real reformers, not kidding around reformers, in key positions. So that's a sign of what he often says, which is the system is corrupt. Drain the swamp is a synonym for the system is corrupt. He knows that. Second thing, I think he understands. I mean, look how quickly they've made some of these appointments. Well, all of them. It's been 2 weeks, and they've got almost every cabinet position. Treasury's still open. There may be another, possibly. Veterans Affairs, I'm losing track, but in general, they filled every position in 2 weeks. And third and most important, I think he has learned the lesson a lot of us learn over time, which is you can't trust anyone who hasn't been humiliated in public. unless someone's really been through it, really been through it, been fired from his job, accused of a crime, and stayed true to what he believes, hasn't collapsed inside and become Michael Cohen. It's only people like that you can really trust under pressure. And I certainly feel that way in my life, which is why when I got fired from my last job, the people I brought with me are the people who came with me, because they've been through all this stuff and I knew who they were. It's easy to be, a great person if there's no pressure applied to you. But when things start to fall apart, people move in directions you can't anticipate. So you want tough people. Courage is the indispensable requirement, I think, for leadership. It's easy to say or even to believe the right things, but it's harder to carry them out under fire. And so I do think he's appointed people who've been through it. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard has been through it. Bobby has been through it. Matt Gaetz, whatever you think, has been through it. I mean, Matt Gaetz got accused of child sex trafficking by the Department of Justice, which then never charged him for child sex trafficking. I mean, which if you think about it, like, people need to go to doing that. I mean, how would you like if I'm like, the DOJ announced today that Clayton Morris is, responsible for genocide in Central Africa. Okay, well, prove it. And then you get fired from your job and all your neighbors hate you and your wife divorces you or whatever, like your world falls apart.
Right.
And then DOJ is like, well, actually, we're not charging him for genocide in Central Africa. It's like, the people who did that to you should be punished for it. And they did that to Matt Gaetz. If he's a child sex trafficker, prove it in court, bitch. And if he's not, you're committing a crime by saying he is. So it's super simple. So I do think, and I believe this, that Trump picked Gaetz and people like Gaetz because he knows who they are and they know who they are because they've been forced to learn.
Right. I think you're right about that. And I think it's so infuriating to hear, to have any of this sort of hidden from us. So even when Speaker Johnson said, we have an investigation, we have a report on Matt Gaetz, we're not going to release it to the public. No, I think that time is over. Release all of it. Release everything now. Put it out here for all of us to see it. Be transparent. You don't get to sort of pick and choose this anymore, and so you're playing their games. I mean, transparency. Put it out in the sun. Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday said, put it out in the sunlight. Everything. The Epstein files, the tapes, everything. Put it out there. Let us judge.
That's exactly right. And, Bobby Kennedy, and I'm sorry to keep going back to Bobby Kennedy. I spent a lot of time with him in the last 6 months. Bobby Kennedy, I think, is the perfect example of this. Bobby Kennedy's led quite a varied life with ups and downs and with behavior he's not proud of, and it's well known. And the people who oppose rooting out corruption have tried to blackmail him many, many times on the basis of that, publicly and privately. And he has the same line every time, which is, I've got so many skeletons in my closet, if they could all vote, I'd be elected king. He just says, they're like, yeah, if you're accusing me of something bad, I'm sure it's true. But I still think what I think, and here's what I believe, and like, why don't you rebut those arguments? No one ever wants to. They want to just get you off the stage by attacking you personally. But the point of keeping all of this stuff secret is to use it as leverage against the people on whom it's collected, obviously. It's why the intel agencies have access to, the back end of the porn sites, because they know what people are watching, and they may have video, and who knows what they have, but they definitely have access to back end of porn sites. And why? And the answer, of course, is to blackmail people. That is the answer, and they do. And it's not just intel agencies who do that. So it's other politicians. It's the media to some extent. Knowing secrets about people gives you power over them. And so my view just in general is I'm against secrets. If I'm keeping a secret from my wife, it's probably not good. It's probably not. I'm not.
Right.
You know what I mean? Nobody wants his secrets revealed. But big picture, if you live in a society with a lot of secrets, you live in a society in which criminal behavior is rampant, and we do. So, declassify it all. And let's start with 9/11. There's absolutely no reason that 23 years later, those files should be classified. Oh, shut up, conspiracy theorists. Well, they're abetting conspiracies. They're actually causing people to go crazy and come up with theories for what happened. They know the answer. And by they, I mean the federal government. Just release it. And same with UAPs, same with the Kennedy assassination, same with everything. Unless you're planning a Normandy invasion on Sunday, in which case you can wait till Monday to tell me about it. You have no legal or moral right to keep that from me. It's my government. I pay for it. You're doing it in my name. I own the government. I'm an equity shareholder in this government, and so are you. And so the fact that the public stands for this and allows secrecy to be used as a tool of control, which it is a lot, and I've seen it, is shocking to me. People should say, no, you cannot classify 1 billion federal documents. On what grounds? Who gave you the right to do that? Just because you're in the job that determines classification doesn't give you the right to hide the truth from the public who own that information. So yeah, I'm with MTG. You know, if we're going to release, and of course they're going to leak it as they leak everything, well, let's leak all the ethics committee reports, and then the people involved can tell you whether or not that's true, and they can defend themselves, and if there's countervailing evidence, we can see it. And just like sunlight, that's the answer. Sunlight. Stop lying. No more lying. Lying is bad. Lying corrodes. It corrupts all of us. We're all participating in a system based on lies, and that degrades us. It diminishes us.
Something you've said really stays with me, and I think about it often as we look at like the independent media journalism landscape, because yeah, they'll try to couch it all right as like this is for your safety, this is for your freedom. We're going to pretend that, you know, Monty is over here because the Normandy invasion is going to happen up near Calais and not down here at Normandy Beach. So you need to rally around it because it's all about protecting our freedoms and our democracy. And we kind of constantly hear this bandied about. But something you said to me, not said to me, but you've said, I think publicly a couple of times after you left your last job, it's about lying by omission. And I think about that often doing the show that we do, because it's very easy to lie by omission, to build a show and to leave out key things because it makes you uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Or because you're receiving money from some source or whatever. So it's very nefarious. I mean, because you can flip on legacy media today and you can say, oh, that they're in the tank for the Democrats. They're in the tank for conservatives and Trump. But there's always like 30% of the things they're missing. They're just not saying it for some reason. And you wonder, and that to me is a deep state. Is it deep state money? How many of the, to me, it's always follow the money. But what do you make of that? Because I see it now happening in alternative media. Like forget the cable box, forget Fox News, forget MSNBC, forget CNN and lying by omission or whatever. But now it's happening in alternative media, like the independent media, and it's I think it's creeping in there and it's bothering me. I don't know if you see it or you're aware of it or what you think.
I think I know what you mean. I mean, well, certainly it's just a feature of the human experience. I've wrestled with it personally because, if I'm being honest, and I always want to be honest, you know, you say things you believe are true. That's your obligation, or well, your obligation on the universe is not to ever say anything you know to be untrue, not to lie. Okay.
Right.
On the other hand, are you under any kind of obligation to say everything you believe is true? No. I mean, I have thoughts about, you know, things that are embarrassing or not relevant to anything. I could be completely wrong, or, you know, gee, he's gained a lot of weight. Probably not going to share that. They're hurtful for no good purpose.
And you turn into Kramer from Seinfeld, where you just walk into a room
exactly
and man, you need a nose job. Like
exactly. It's totally right. So you don't want to be that person. You don't want to cause harm for no reason. You want to be constructive and kind. On the other hand, you know, there are also some facts of American life that are very obvious, that are never spoken out loud, partly because, you know, people seek to be polite and not to hurt other people without cause, and partly because people are afraid to say the most obvious things. And that's certainly true in our political realm. And so there are plenty of things that I believe to be true that I don't say, either because they're hurtful, I'm not sure they're right, or they're just so overwhelming that it's like, okay, you know, I don't really know quite what to do about that. So it might be better just to state affirmatively what you would like your country to be, which is sovereign, capable of acting in its own interest. That's really important. Honest. You know, you'd want a government that just says what it's doing and why it's doing it, tells you the truth as a matter of law. Like, you're not allowed to lie to the public. Why should you be allowed to lie? It's illegal to lie to a federal agent, as everyone knows. And many of my friends have found out the hard way. But it is not illegal for them to lie to you. So it's like, who came up with that system? Anyway, these are our employees, but they can lie to us. If I catch my housekeeper lying, if I catch her in my safe and she's won't say what she's doing there, she's out. But in the federal system, it's like you can catch the feds in your safe. They don't have no obligation to tell you why they're there. And there's nothing you can do about it. In fact, if you complain, they'll put you in jail. So clearly, we've got a screwed up system. But yeah, there's a lot that's unsaid. And there are also, of course, taboos. And we grew up in a society that was governed much more than we realized by taboos, things you just don't say. And both of us are from, basically Anglo backgrounds, which is a culture that doesn't say everything out loud already. So, it's a process of learning to articulate things you've taught not to articulate, figuring out, what's a helpful way to say something, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, just to bottom line it, there are huge facts, determinative facts about American life and politics that are never said out loud. That is absolutely right. Sorry.
I think some of the people that are speaking out about it are getting, they're being destroyed for speaking out about it. And you're seeing that, and it's really disturbing. And I guess it kind of, as I think about the future of journalism, what does it mean for independent journalism? Obviously, journalism is very important to you. How do you see it evolving, changing, given the fact that this past election cycle, people didn't turn on their cable box. CNN's ratings are verifiably in the toilet. Done. Layoffs, MSNBC, no one's watching them. They were on the air this week crying, basically, asking how they can regain relevancy up against, the independent media now and social media influencers. And of course, it's condescending, right? This idea that people are only watching 20-second sound bites is just total bullshit. People are watching your 2-hour shows as one of the most popular shows in America. They're watching Joe Rogan's 3-hour shows as one of the most popular programs in the world, in world history. And so MSNBC gets up there and, denigrates people that they say they're watching 20-second clips and that's all they're doing. And how do they regain relevancy and all of these things. But where do you see journalism going? Elon Musk said, you are the media now after Election Day. How do you think it's going to change and evolve over the next few years? How important is it for citizen journalists?
Well, I would just start by saying there's nothing more corrupt than what we have. So I'm glad that it's going away. There's nothing shallower than cable news. Life in it. So for them to say, the public is reaching conclusions we disagree with because they're not watching long and they're getting all their news from TikTok or something. I just want to restate, there's nothing shallower, dumber, more repetitive, more controlled, less informative than cable news. I think I can say that with authority. So can you. So if they're claiming that the other guys are just like not up to their level of journalism or rectitude, like that, it's just dogs barking. It means nothing to me. Obviously, we're entering a much freer, more open period. Elon Musk deserves 100% of the credit for that because he has this platform at scale, the only one at scale that's open. Joe Rogan deserves the credit for creating an entire new genre, podcasting, from which I'm benefiting. So I'm grateful to Joe Rogan, and I mean that. Plus, I love Joe Rogan anyway. But he did that single-handedly. So, and I guess we're both beneficiaries of it. He created this thing like it didn't exist before. It's an amazing thing. And if the world were fair, then, everyone in the media would be tipping a hat to him. Like, did you invent the newspaper? Did you invent radio? Did you invent television? I don't think so. Joe Rogan essentially invented podcasting. He made it clear to everybody else that this could both have an effect and be a real business. Who thought that would be true? He proved it. Here are my concerns. I don't have too many concerns. Here's something that annoys me. If there's a lesson of what happened to television and newspapers, print, and legacy media, they died because they were corrupt. The business models changed, et cetera, et cetera. There are ways they won't evolve. Like the people who work at NBC News will not have careers in journalism 10 years from now. And the reason they won't is not because of technology. It's because they have no credibility because they're corrupt. They're liars. So that's really the lesson. Corruption kills you, especially in a business predicated on trust, which is the media. Don't emulate that. Don't be corrupt. And, there are people on social media, influencers on both sides, and we're learning more about it now, who took money in order to endorse certain people or ideas. That's corrupt. I mean, look, I take advertising. I think you do too. It's okay to say, I'm being paid to promote this product. And by the way, I like the product or whatever you say, but it's very clear you're being paid to promote something. It secretly promoting things for money is, maybe you make, a decent living doing that. But over time, it devalues your currency and makes people not believe you, not trust you. Why would they? And there was some of that in this last cycle. And I hope the people who did it will just admit that they did it and be very open about it. And I hope it's not like a story we find out about in 5 years and all of a sudden, people don't trust us anymore as a result of the behavior of a few people. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And that's what I worry about for independent media. I mean, we are, as you know, especially on the right, we're under enormous pressure already from the censors.
Yes.
If you're broadcasting on YouTube, you're already, up against it. We're every day in our live stream, I see some people saying we don't even receive notifications when you go live. YouTube doesn't tell us you're going live. You're suppressed. You're suppressed. You're suppressed. So we know we are. We're already up against it, and now you're gonna layer on this additional level of like corruption, and you're gonna. I don't want to say it's corrupt. It's just immoral, really, to say that you're I love Kamala Harris. I love Kamala Harris, and you guys got to go out and vote for her. And I'm not going to tell my audience that I received, tens of thousands of dollars from her, or the same on the Trump side. That you're not going to say that.
And I don't know. By the way, I don't know how widespread that is, but if even the suspicion arises that people are not telling the truth because they're being paid to lie. I think that's incredibly cruel. I know, because I just exited 30 years in that business. That's very corrosive. So I hope that is not happening in any widespread way, and I hope that it ends, because I mean, more than anything, I would much rather be wrong. I have been wrong a million times, including about big things, but I don't want to be dishonest, and I don't want to be seen as dishonest. Both for my own reasons of integrity, but also because that, like, why would anyone watch you if you're a liar? Like, no one wants to watch a liar. It's not worth your time. That's why I stopped reading the New York Times. I don't want it in my head. I don't know what's a lie and what's not. Just get away from me. And I think most people feel that way.
And I think it's also troubling on the other side, to be fair, is if we find out, and again, I haven't even heard this story, and if this is, you know a lot more than I do, I will say that 100%, and your sources are phenomenal, so I will say that. But if we find out that like, the RNC or somebody from some super PAC related to Trump was paying off like conservative YouTubers or Rumble people or something like that, I think that would be deeply disturbing on that side too, not just on the person who accepted the money, but it would raise a lot of questions for me on the backside, I guess. I'd have to really wrestle with that and sit with and think with that, because my immediate reaction is I'd be bothered by it. But maybe not. Like if I sat with it for a while, I'd be like, well, how maybe is it any different than some other television ad? But I don't know. I think I would be bothered by it. I think I'm bothered by it.
And
That's just my
I
gut
have no
reaction.
evidence that has happened at all. But I just think it's important to keep in mind that purity of spirit is detectable by others. People know who's being honest, who's saying something because, I really believe this. That's why I'm saying it. And I think people can feel that. And don't take a dark path. Like, there's enough money in this country. You don't need to destroy yourself and your credibility for 50 grand. Like, that's not a good trade for you or anyone else, I don't think.
Can I ask you an uncomfortable question?
Oh, I love that. I specialize in those, Clayton.
You specialize in it. Well, we look at Trump's cabinet coming together.
Yep.
You know a lot of these people very, very well.
Yep.
And I have to say, I'll just put it out there first for me. If I'm going to ask you a tough question, I'll put myself out there. I've said it multiple times here on the show over the past few weeks. Like, I was stunned that Mike Pompeo was even in like the circle. So I know from my own reporting that there were some people close to Trump that made that not happen. and if I believe you might have been one of those people. So if that's the case, that you talked to Trump into not hiring a criminal for his own cabinet, I'm excited about that. First of all, did you have any influence of that whatsoever? And then also, are there any other people in his cabinet that maybe made you cringe?
Well, on the question of Pompeo, I would say two things. One, I have no idea if I had influence or not. I think Mike Pompeo is a criminal. I've said that many, many times. He plotted the murder of someone who'd not even been charged with a crime, which federal appointees are not allowed to do. You can't kill people because they embarrass you. So that's criminal behavior. He's never been charged for it. He threatened to sue me for saying that. I will say once again, please do. I would enjoy the discovery portion of that exercise.
I would love the discovery of that. That would be an amazing.
It would be amazing, and I would look forward to it. So that's the first thing. I have no idea if I had influence. We all overstate our own influence. So I always assume I have very little influence, but that's what I wanted. So I was grateful that it happened. Second, I don't even know, in point of fact, if Pompeo was really in the running or not. I think it's possible Pompeo is a international businessman of some kind. Not clear what kind. But, if you're doing business abroad, you want to be talked about as a potential Secretary of Defense because it's helpful for your business. So I have no idea. I really don't know the degree to which he was ginning that up in order to help his business. It's unknown and probably unknowable, but he's not. Look, it's not even about the people. I am very concerned that the people who have hated Trump for 8 years and run out of ways to destroy him, indicting him, well, first calling him a racist, spying on him with the federal intel agencies, sicking the FBI on him, trying to put him in prison, then trying to kill him at least twice, probably more, actually, but at least twice. And that those people, out of options, have decided the only way to stop Trump and the disclosure that a Trump administration will bring. Once again, disclosure is what they fear, having their crimes revealed, that the only way to stop Trump is with a world war. And so I've been pretty fixated on that for months, probably more than a year. I've just thought a lot about it. And I know a lot of the people involved, and they're very, very, very focused on war. Permanent Washington doesn't care about domestic policy, in case your viewers, I'm sure, know this, but just want to restate it. They don't care about domestic policy. They don't care about fixing the country, closing the borders, ending the drug crisis, getting the cartels out of, the entire Southwest. They don't care about that. What they care about is exercising power abroad, killing people because it makes them feel like God, and making money. And that's where the money is, trillions of dollars. So they care about foreign policy. And I have been concerned and remain concerned that that group of people, which is basically everyone in DC in both parties, wants Trump to take the country to war, either against Russia or, far more likely, Iran. And I think what people outside, I don't know how to the degree to which this is understood, but I just will say it. A war with Iran is a world war. This is not 2002. Iran is now part of a coalition that includes the biggest economies in the world and the largest militaries in the world. So a war with Iran means a war in effect, or, by proxy, but still a war with Russia, China, Turkey, and a lot of the rest of the world. So that's a world war. It's not just as simple as we're going to take out their nuclear facilities. Okay. How are you going to do that? And how are you going to ensure that doesn't destroy the United States in the process? And of course, they don't care whether it destroys the United States. That's the actual answer. They don't care. And if they cared, they would pause and think about it. But anyway, I don't want to be bitter about it. But to me, it's really simple. Anybody who would even consider having a war with Russia or Iran should not be in any position of power at all in this administration or any other administration. It's super simple. And I think especially Ukraine is so obvious. Now, there is some debate on Iran, and I'm not endorsing Iran. I'm not a Shiite. But there's really no debate at this point about the debacle that has been Ukraine. Ukraine's not going to win. It's just completely destroyed Ukraine. It hasn't crushed Russia. It's really hurt the United States. So anyone who can't say that out loud should not have a job in the federal bureaucracy. So that's my litmus test. It's not about people or personality. Right. Of course, I know them all, as I know you do too, and I like a lot of them. I even like some of the guys I disagree with. One in particular I like very much. Nice guy, good guy. But it's a simple, practical test for whether or not you should wield power. Do you have the requisite wisdom to lead my country? And if you're still defending the war in Ukraine, you do not have the requisite wisdom to lead my country. That's my opinion.
That's a good litmus test. We should start there. That's like the basic. That's like the kindergarten test. Do you support this?
Yes!
And you
exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
It's amazing because you even have. I was stunned by something top Ukrainian commander Zaluzhny just said this week. I mean, he said he was in one of his master's homes in the UK, in Britain, where he was meeting with Ukrainian troops, of course, who are being trained there in the UK. And he told the troops there that there's almost no hope for your survival, and that you need to go to the front lines basically knowing you're going to die. And I mean, that's quite a prep talk. And I mean, so for this like vicious proxy war, kill or be killed. And this is the truth of it. You know, over 1 million Ukrainians dead now, or permanently maimed, an entire generation of young men wiped out, a country destroyed. And they're still trying to sell this thing. And then, of course, over the past few days, we've seen the madness that is unfolding in the White House, allowing long-range missiles to be used from Ukraine at NATO's direction. Make no mistake, anyone watching this knows that Ukrainians don't even know how to use these missiles. It's NATO that's doing it, of course, and attacking inside of Russia. And then with add on top of that, the Biden administration now has okayed anti-personnel mines to be used, something they've long said absolutely we won't use. These are basically a lot of like the same pedal mines that are thrown into the ground in Donetsk and the Donbass region. And children go to the playgrounds and they find these little pedal mines that look like leaves. They pick them up and their arms are blown off or they're killed. And the Biden administration was absolutely against this. This was their stance. And now suddenly, within the past week, all of this has changed. So who the hell is running the White House? I mean, you've got, again, I know you're humble about this, but you've got amazing sources there. Like, Biden is not, who is running the White House? Like, who is our de facto president? Is it Antony Blinken right now? Is it Jake Sullivan? Who is doing this?
Well, if you'd asked me yesterday morning, I would have said Tony Blinken, who has been running it since the beginning. But now I would say Satan, because I really think that you've got, dark forces in charge. I mean, there's no justification for using anti-personnel mines in this conflict, which can't hope to be solved with anti-personnel mines resolved in any way. The only effect of that move is to kill innocents, period. That's it. That's the only effect. And they know that. And so they're doing it anyway, because killing is the point. So it's evil. I think we should say that. I don't think it's a matter of defending democracy. The president of Ukraine is not elected. He's a dictator. He literally passed his term and kept serving. He's a dictator. And that country's just shut down a Christian denomination, put priests in jail. Like, how many more markers of dictatorship do you need to call it what it is, which is totalitarian? So everything about it is horrifying. I'm so glad that you mentioned what's happening in the UK and France. There's the complicity of Western European countries in this. Really, I hope books are written about it. But there's something about a dying empire, collapsing demographically, totally pointless finance-based economy, no self-respect at all, nihilism rising. There's something about that mix, the final days of a dying civilization, that causes it to lash out in this kind of orgy of killing for its own sake. It's really the darkest thing I could. It's like you imagine Rome collapsing and the Vandals toppling buildings and having orgies in the streets and all that stuff. Really, it's the end of an empire is more like a kind of suicide, a kind of murder-suicide, where, the formerly great power kills itself and then takes a lot of people out as it does. It's like more horrifying than I ever thought, reading about the end of Rome. And I think it's probably pretty consistent over time. I mean, this is what partition was in India. The Second World War ends, Britain, quote, wins, but really they've lost and they have to give up India, and which they've had for 300 years. And rather than figure out a sort of good way to do it, they just like pull out basically in one day and allow this massive carnage between Indians, between Sikhs and Muslims and Hindus in India, in which hundreds of thousands of people died. That did not need to happen. Why did the British do that? Because there's something about the end of something great that's always ugly and vicious and violent, hurtful to those around it. There's like deep stuff going on here that I don't, trust me, I do not pretend to understand all of this stuff, but like the behavior of France and particularly Great Britain, which itself has become totalitarian, where lots of Britons, native-born Britons, are in prison for posting social media opinions, and they're in jail for that. Like, that's not a free country.
Right.
It's a totalitarian country. Same with Canada. Same with New Zealand. Same with Australia. It's like, what the hell is going on? It'll be hundreds of years before some wise person can assess what happened to the English-speaking world 20 years into the 21st century. But all at once, they decided to kill themselves and a lot of other people on the way out. It's really amazing.
It's easy to say, oh, it's the globalists, and it's part of this globalist agenda. They want to get rid of nation states, right? They want to devalue the U.S. dollar and U.S. currency to create a global currency. They don't want boundaries. They don't want borders. They don't want massive population either. And I think about that often. And I have to kind of pull myself back from that cliff a little bit. But then I keep walking up to the cliff because I keep seeing signs that that's true. And it's deeply, deeply disturbing. And you see what's happening with Trump right now and these dark forces that are surrounding him. I think you tweeted the other day, I think you said something like, the prayers of good people got Donald Trump elected 2 weeks ago. Wars with Russia and Iran are the counterattack. And I know you don't post a lot on X. Like when you do.
Never.
It's
never.
Yeah. I mean, it's very thoughtful and it's for a purpose, right? So when I saw that, I just shook my head thinking, my God, well, if this is the counterattack, who's the counterattack from? I mean, this is some dark force that's really trying to undermine this Trump administration, right? I mean, and it's so evil. I mean, have you ever seen an administration like this where leaving office, you try to drag the next administration into a world war? I mean, I get what the Clintons did. Leaving office, they removed the W's from the keyboards for George W. Bush. Like, like
I remember that.
This is totally different.
Well, I'm hardly a theologian. I mean, I'm the opposite of a theologian. I don't understand really anything about theology and really don't care to. But I just have noticed through years of observation that there is a kind of dualism isn't exactly the right word, but there is a war in the unseen world between light and darkness, good and bad. It's been described by every civilization since the beginning of time, so I think we can assume it's real. And you do see that, expressions of good, manifestations of good are sometimes followed and vice versa by outbursts of evil. And I don't think there's any other way to read that. And by counterattack in that tweet, which I wrote this morning, I don't have my Twitter password, so I sent it to my office and said, please tweet this. Thought of it in my sauna this morning, but I was just brooding on it and saying prayers about it. And I was like, I think Trump, I don't know that Trump's like a super faithful Christian or anything, but I know a lot of very faithful Christians prayed for Trump. And I think it had an effect. I think it was the determinative effect. I really believe that. And the counterattack is promoting war for its own sake without any promise of any kind of meaningful victory. Truly war for the sake of killing people, totally unadorned. No one's even pretending that we're going to get democracy or something if these missiles kill Putin. I mean, there's no argument even. It's like, no, we're killing because we can. That is the definition of evil. And if I could just say one thing that does distress me about American society is that not enough time has been spent thinking about how violence is bad. Violence is bad. It just is. I'm sorry. And a lot of people that I like, I've worked with, have defended violence over the years. And I think self-defense is legitimate. But killing people for the sake of killing them because you don't like them or you think they represent something bad, that's evil. I just want to be clear. Violence is bad. And by the way, if you're a Christian, it's not allowed. It's super obvious you don't need to be a theologian to glean that from the New Testament. You're not allowed to do that. Jesus is being hauled away to be tortured to death on false charges. And, one of his guys raises a sword against one of the people carrying him away, dragging him off to get tortured to death. And Jesus scolds the man with the sword, who's doing it on his behalf, says, put that away. And so we are not allowed to commit violence against people, except I would argue maybe under self-defense, in a self-defense scenario. but certainly not so we can feel powerful or because we're annoyed or because we don't like a certain president or something. It's like, it's nuts. And because not enough people say that, it goes unquestioned. But it is bad, and it doesn't. I've seen a lot of violence, a lot, and I don't know, probably more than Toria Nuland has seen. So I think people who've seen it are not quite as enthusiastic about it. I mean, I was never in the military, but I've been around that stuff when people get hurt, and it's like, no, this is not good at all. And anyone who thinks it's good is a freak. And I just, for the remainder of however long I have on this earth, I'm going to keep saying that because I believe that's true.
Like CNN last week when they hauled out Tammy Duckworth to talk about the virtues of putting women in combat. Like, I don't think that's the flex you thought it is. When all of Tammy Duckworth's limbs have been destroyed as a result of combat, and CNN's like, see, women can. This is why we want to send women to be maimed in combat.
Did they really do that?
Oh,
they
yeah.
Really did that?
I couldn't believe it. Like, that was the argument against
I don't think...
I don't know who said it. I think it was Matt Gaetz said women should not be in combat. I think it was a response to Matt Gaetz saying, look, we should be protecting. I've said, and I tweeted out, I said, we should be protecting our women, not sending them to the front lines of these wars. And CNN trotted Tammy Duckworth out to say, see, this is why you should. It was unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. And I agree I think what you said is the truest thing. It's not that women aren't brave or capable. Of course they're brave. It's like, I've got a whole business. It's, women are into, I have 3 daughters. I couldn't be more for women. I couldn't respect their talents more. But my obligation as a man is to protect the women of my life. That's why I'm here. And if we have a country, then the whole purpose of the military is to prevent our women from being killed and raped. That's the only reason we have a military. And so if instead we're asking women to fight our wars for us, that's grotesque and dishonorable. And so it's not a question of women's rights. It's a question of men's obligations as men, as protectors and providers. That's our job. Now, I know we're living in a period where we can pretend that's not our job, and your wife's got a job at Citibank and she's a provider or whatever. But, this is just a moment in time. This is just a spot on a continuum. And that is not the rule. It's biology doesn't suggest that that's true. It's not real. And, over time, people will look back on this and say, boy, those people talked themselves into some seriously destructive nonsense. But most destructive of all is the idea that, I'm going to sit back and let the women in my house fight a war. Are you joking? If I have a home invasion in my house, do I say to my wife, you know what? I got the last one. Will you repel the invaders? You know what I mean? One. She would never speak to me again because she would know that I've let her down in, her moment of need and shirked my most basic duty, like the most basic duty that you have as a man. So I find it repulsive, actually, and I feel very angry and judgmental about it. And they've reframed it as this feminist issue, just like go work yourself to death at a bank and never have children. That's liberation. Like they sell people on these ideas that hurt them, that deny them the things they want most and that give them the greatest joy. They deny themselves those things so they can work for Larry Fink. And then they convince themselves, or they are convinced by the propaganda machine, that that's somehow victory or something. Like, I'm winning. Do you think Tammy Duckworth gets in bed and is like, I have no legs? Like, this is really kind of the apogee of feminism. Like, I did my part for women. I mean, maybe she thinks that. I feel sorry for her. I just want to be clear. I'm not attacking Tammy Duckworth. She is a victim of a disgusting system that exploits and hurts women and sells it to them as liberation. And she's maybe dumb enough to believe it. I hope not.
There was a piece I'll get you out of here in a second here because I know you got to run.
Whoa, you spun me up, Clayton.
Well, there was a piece last week, and Natalie and I were talking about it, and it was about there's an entire generation now of grandparents who are like, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, and it's like the missing generation. So all these grandparents are just sad. They're all sad that their kids just opted to not have children, and so these grandparents walk past playgrounds and they look at these little grandchildren there. They think, oh, my kids just. They wanted to work. They wanted to work for Citibank. They wanted to, that was and I don't think they couched it as this, it was a feminist movement, but you and I have seen it. You see it, and the push, and the way that we've pushed people, women specifically, is they should be working up until into their 40s, when they can have dangerous pregnancies. If they're lucky, they can get pregnant. But it's deeply disturbing, and I think you're seeing that in the birth gap in the United States right now too. Too few children being born to Americans. It's deeply sad. It's really sad. I felt bad for these grandparents. It's really upsetting.
It's so funny. When I was a kid, we learned two things. One, that slavery and serfdom were bad. The idea that, the rich white people would just sit back in leisure and let brown people do all the work for them. Now I'm learning it's racist to be against that. And and the second thing I learned was that only truly retrograde barbaric civilizations, like under feudalism, for example, in Europe, would allow pregnant women to just like give birth in the field. It's like,
right.
Now we have, the most evolved. Apple is like, no, freeze your eggs.
Right.
I'll fly you to another state for an abortion. It's like, really, which exploits women more? Again, the amount of slavery that's sold to us as liberation just absolutely blows my mind. If people could just like pause for a second, turn off the device and think clearly, they'd be like, wait a second. No, Apple is not my friend. Google is not my friend. BlackRock is not. These are my enemies. These are the enemies of human flourishing. They're the enemies of the things that my heart desires. And the whole system is set up to make a small number of people really rich. And yet, last thing I'll say, Antifa, which was, of course, laid dormant during the entire 4 years of Biden because they are the youth wing of the Democratic Party. Maybe they'll be mobilized again. But they were always like, we're so radical, we're Antifa. And I always thought to myself, if you're really radical, why are you never mentioning the fact that credit card companies are charging 20% interest? They're always radical, like we hate white people, or, we hate any group that's not voting for the Democratic Party. They hate whites because they're not voting Democrat. That's why they hate whites. Now they're going to hate Hispanics because Hispanics aren't either. I hope Hispanics are ready to be denounced. But they never said a word about the actual power in this country. And the banks are at the very top of that pyramid. The people who live off the interest that you pay, that enslaves you. No one ever mentioned that. The radicals never mentioned that. Not one time. So, I would just hope the next generation of radicals takes aim at the actual power structures, at the actual tools of oppression, which are not racial, they're economic. I just really hope that, because that would be a nice conversation to have.
I'll get you out of here on this, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this, because back in the day when you and I were sitting there on Fox and Friends couch and talking for 4 hours a day in commercial breaks and having coffee, you and I would often talk about UFOs, UAPs, and all of this stuff. And I was a crazy person, of course, so but you had this hearing, of course, the other day, and we're past the point. Yes, aliens exist, whatever. We have reverse engineered their craft. We have these materials. We know this now. That's on the congressional record. We have this stuff. Let's move the conversation beyond that. I want to ask you about 0 point energy and these technologies that I think this government has in their possession. I think it's verifiable that instantaneous travel. I think it's one of the greatest cover-ups in human history that we don't have access to this technology. Are you hopeful at all that these members of Congress, Nancy Mace and others, are going to be able to, Timber Shed and others, are going to be able to pull this out of these deep programs and release it? What's when you're in the smoky filled rooms, what are you hearing about this?
Well, no, I'm not at all hopeful. Hopeful. I'm not at all confident. One of the members, I don't want to betray secrets, but one of the, and I think this is correct, the members of Congress you just mentioned, I won't say which, pushed hard on the UAP Disclosure Act of 2022, which has never kind of been enacted. And as a result was primaried by his own party, which is, the kind of maximum punishment in electoral politics. So there is a massive, we cannot overstate the effort in place to prevent disclosure. And the question really is why. And so, these technologies clearly exist. It's not clear to me who possesses them. I'm pretty sure no one's profiting off of them. So, you can construct all kinds of explanations for why. But, everyone I've known, which is every president who's been really read into this stuff, is unwilling to disclose what he learned. And you have to ask, why is that? So I think the truth is, and I haven't gotten to the truth, but I've gotten close enough that I'm like, ooh. I think it's very, very disruptive, way disruptive. It's not just that Lockheed is making a lot of money on anti-gravity technology or, we've been visited by people from their planet or whatever. I mean, I think there's more there. I mean, there is more there. So, and I'm not, exactly sure. I'm not going to speculate, but I think it's a big deal. I think it's a bigger deal than we often allow for it being. Right. I mean, obviously,
yeah. I mean,
this has been going on for 80 years. So.
Yeah, I could literally, with this technology, not have to go to the airport, wait 6 hours, take my family with luggage. I could be at your house, and have dinner with you right now. Like, and it's to me, it's just a massive crime that we're allowing like cancer.
But can I ask you a question? So there is this there's this process of recovering of these craft, whatever they are, right? And the so-called biologics that reside within, supposedly. And I'm sure you're aware of this. So how exactly are there so many crashed UAPs? What is that? They have the technology to, travel 150 knots underwater, but they somehow crash a lot. I mean, it doesn't kind of make any sense. They just have like bad GPS or something. It's like they possess technology that defies the laws of physics, but they crash. So I just don't think that makes any sense. And what I believe is true is that these recoveries have been the result of the summoning of these craft. And that's the word that was relayed to me, the summoning of these craft. So, if you're summoning, what does that even mean? You're talking about a phenomenon that exists in the spiritual realm. I mean, that's more like a seance than a science expedition, right? It doesn't make it any less real, by the way, but it changes the category.
Right, when we can't wrap our brains around interdimensionality, right? And so I think that's when you start to get into the, it's mind-bending to think about. We think, they're just coming from off-world, or are they literally right here interdimensionally, or they've been here for thousands of years in our oceans. And there's been quite a bit of people I've spoken to have told me about early craft that they were recovering in 1940s, apparently were wildly affected by and deeply disrupted by radar. And it was causing all sorts of problems with these craft, and the initial craft that they had recovered were as a result of radar interfering with their with the way they were traveling. I've also heard GPS over the years. But I've also heard sources tell me that think about all of the test, craft and probes and things that we launch on a regular basis that crash, that they are somehow omnipotent, that they wouldn't crash is laughable as well. They're going to have craft that crash. It's just a matter of, it's just physics. It's going to happen at some point. So I don't know. I'm hopeful that in my lifetime we'll get something where we get the government to say, all those cars you've been driving for so long, yes, we've had the technology for 100 years that we can travel instantaneously, and we'd like to now present it to you. And sorry, all of the people that make billions of dollars a year, you're out of a job. But it's too disruptive, I think, at this point. Anyway, it is disruptive. And the last thing I'll say is we just had, as you pointed out, congressional hearings on this under oath, and nobody noticed. And so you wonder, if a fleet of UAPs landed in Central Park, it would be like a 2-day story, and then it'd be like, okay, on to the next thing. Maybe we don't have the capacity to understand or accept this, whatever this is. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. I could say this. Robert Hastings, who wrote the famous book on UFPs attacking our, atomic energy silos, our atomic missile silos in Montana and other places at Malmstrom Air Force Base and so forth, and turning off all of those nuclear weapons that aren't even interconnected. Like, the systems are redundant. They're not even paired together, and the UFO just hovering over top of them, turning all of them off. That goes back to the 1960s, and so I think there's been some revelations that came out of these hearings. I liked Lou Elizondo on the record said we are not alone. Like, that's now in the congressional record that we are not alone. And he's, instead of saying he thinks so, he now emphatically said it, like, on the record. I think he's maybe feels a little bit more free to say something like that. So I don't know. I know people thought, we're not getting a lot of this from the congressional record here, but I felt that there was some pretty big revelations during this past hearing.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, anyway, again, I could talk to you all night, and I absolutely would, and I'm looking forward to being able to do that with you. But I just really wanted to sit down with you for a little bit post-election here, and just kind of, now that you're not traveling the world like the Beatles, be able to just have a conversation with you. So. So
fewer,
I am,
fewer groupies, but thank you.
I am tremendously grateful for your time. Thank you for everything you do. You're a beacon of light for all of us. I say that wholeheartedly, and I think you lead us, whether you know it or not. You lead a lot of us in independent media and in journalism, and I think you are a shining example of how to live and how to lead in this time. So I just want to say that and thank you. And,
Well,
thank you to
I'm
your
grateful.
beautiful
Thank
family.
you, Clayton. My longtime friends, Clayton Morris. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tucker.